Isaiah Collier, USC guard, 6'4". I think he was like 6'2" and 3/4 or 6'2.5" without shoes. So we'll say 6'4", 205 pounds. So strong. We knew that. 6'5" wingspan, which not the best, but also like, if he's a point guard, like it's not terrible either. 19.7 years old on draft night. So he's like, almost a year older than Bub. 30 minutes per game, 16.3 points per game, 2.9 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 3.3 turnovers, 1.5 steals, 0.2 blocks, field goal percentage of 49, 3-point percentage of 33.8 on 3.6 attempts per game, 67.3 free throw percentage on 5.8 free throw attempts per game, 56.7 true shooting, 53.3 effective field goal, 19.3 per, BPM of 4.2. Preseason stock price. ESPN had him at 1. No Ceilings had him at 8. Bleacher Report at 3. Yahoo at 1. Athletic at 2. Tankathon at 2. He was the third ranked prospect on the draft deck IPO with an average price of 3.2. Currently, ESPN has him at 11. No Ceilings at 16. Bleacher Report at 8. Yahoo at 15. The Ringer at 16. The Athletic at 14. Tankathon at 14. Average price of 13.4. 12th ranked prospect on the May draft rankings. So, at 13.4, is Isaiah Collier stock price too high, too low, or is it just right?
Oh, God. Corey, for me, it's too high. I have Collier now at 23 on my board. And no, 24. I apologize. I have him actually right behind Carrington, just like one of our viewers. And Collier's a guy that I've been able to watch in person. A guy who, to be honest, even when I saw him in person, didn't change my mind a ton in terms of what I saw on film and then what I saw in person. But
and you saw him in multiple contexts because you saw him at the Hoop Summit and then you saw him a few times at USC.
An interesting player, for sure. Very interesting player. I think the measurements were interesting because we are the same height. I've stood next to him 20 times and we are exactly the same height. So whatever he measured at, I think it was 6'2"-ish, right? Without shoes, that sounds about right. So no lies were told there. But it just, freak athlete, really exciting getting downhill. We'll get into the scout. Let me stop there. But
I want to talk about his athleticism, actually.
Sure. But I think overall, I have him in that range just because there are some real warts to his game that he's going to have to change my mind on. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I came out higher on him after, diving back into him. He was really rough at the beginning of the year to where I was kind of like, he's not draftable right now. And, he was struggling or whatever, yes. and he finished the season on a much higher note. So I think his stock is just right now. Okay. I'm not sure I would necessarily take him in the lottery because he's just not the kind of player philosophically that, I think I would want running my team. But I get the appeal of what he could be if he maxes out his potential. Even though I think the NBA is kind of moving away from that style of guard. But I do get it. And I do think that he was pretty good towards the end of his season. And I thought it was admirable how, he at least helped USC be a little bit competitive towards the end, even though they had a overall pretty rough season. All right. Where do you want to start with Isaiah Collier? You said you have Bub ahead of Collier. I have Bub ahead of him as well. So where do you want to start with Collier?
Corey, we can start on offense. We can start with shooting. We just start on offense overall. I think that's a good.
Let's start with his. Let's start with his. I guess strength. Right, and which is clearly his downhill driving, his rim pressure. You mentioned his athleticism, right? If you watch him, absolute blur in the open court, yes. Right? In transition, he's got that 0 to 60 speed. And whether he has the ball in his hands or whether he's leaking out, he can just get ahead of guys. So he's a terror in transition, with or without the ball in his hands. Super bursty, right? Like that first step burst is really impressive. And he can just kind of blow by in a straight line. When he's in the air, I think he's got pretty good hang time, which allows for some pretty creative finishes, but he's not super bouncy.
Yes.
He's really not bouncy like at all. And you don't expect that from him because he is so fast, right? And you think of like, you try to be like, all right, well, like Derrick Rose, John Wall, these fast guards, maybe De'Aaron Fox, right? And it's like all these dudes were like able to play above the rim, and like Collier can't really play above the rim in the same way. You know what I mean? Especially because he's like 205. Like he got blocked 27 times this year. Like, which is, kind of a lot. He only had 6 dunks. Now, he missed a little bit of time, but like, for reference on the dunks, like Reed Sheppard had 5, and like De'Aaron Fox had 19 in his season. So, and again, like Collier missed some time, so he would have had more than 6 dunks. But like even before the injury, he wasn't like throwing it down over dudes. Like it was he there was a point in time in the season when he was healthy, he had less dunk than Reed Sheppard. But with that said, he is a pretty good finisher in the half court, 56.4%, 61% overall. Can absorb contact. He can stay balanced. So whether like he's like, putting up a floater or he's getting to the rim, he can still kind of remain, in his trajectory when he handles contact, a little bit different than like Bub. Like he can go through your chest. Like there was a drive Cody Williams was ISO'd on it, or he had Cody Williams on an island, top of the key in a Colorado game, and he just went straight through him. Like he dipped his shoulder into Cody and just pushed Cody underneath the hoop and just had like a wide open layup because of it. So like, even though he's not like super vertical, he can still be effective near the rim. And again, he has some even though he's not getting super high, there are times where he has like up and unders, like, and shows some touch around the rim too. But yeah, I think that, the finishing, if that's going to be his biggest strength, you do kind of wish he was even a little bit better than that. But like, I think he's going to be a good finisher in the NBA. They're just, right now, he hasn't shown to be a super vertical, put you on a poster type of athlete. And like, I do think that there were times where he struggled against length. And again, like that's going to be his strength. I think he'll figure it out, but I think it could be a journey early on.
I cannot agree with you more about everything that you said. Saw it in person. Even in warm-ups, he's not doing anything that crazy in layup lines with the dunks and whatever. It's just he's not that type of vertical athlete. I also love what you said about the straight line speed with him getting downhill. He is one of these guys that seems to add more as he gets hit more, if that makes sense. And we've had guys like that in the past that we've talked about, almost like a King T'Challa in Black Panther, where his suit just embraces more and more damage, and that gives him more and more power type of situation with Collier. And it's definitely there. The issue with him is I thought, sorry, Corey, I don't know if you mentioned this, but like I thought the touch was okay. Touch is so with him. The biggest thing with him though is just like he's such a blur getting downhill and so physical that it creates a lot of opportunities for him, especially in college against college defenders. The only issue will be that the scouting report will be out on him in terms of his outside shooting. And because of the lack of an outside jumper, NBA teams are going to be much better prepared for the Isaiah Collier drive. So I think the Collier thing, like, yeah, definitely interesting, but there are real holes to his game that will make even his strength a little bit more difficult for him to get to on the next level.
The other thing, and teams are, obviously the scout is going to be like, make him a shooter, right? Like,
yep,
that's obvious. go under on ball screens. There's still going to be times where it doesn't matter. And I think like if he's in the right situation with better shooters, it's not like he had snipers around him necessarily at USC. So if he has more space, better shooters around him, even if guys are going under, I still think he can find his way to the rim. It'll be harder for sure.
Yeah.
Like we saw Scoot struggle a lot, right, this year. And Scoot is a better prospect to me, like than Collier is. And they have a lot of similarities in the kind of archetype of player. And we saw how hard it was for Scoot at times. But I still think that you see the flashes, and I think Collier will show those same flashes too. So teams are obviously going to prove that he can punish unders, whatever. But like in the half court specifically, when he is, because he is able, he's got a good handle, tight, good, like quick crossover, like again, like super violent movements.
Yes.
But it's a lot of catch and hold, man. It's a lot of like get the ball, dribble, take a couple dribbles back, line a guy up. All right, nothing's there. Now I'll move off of it. Like there's just, and I just don't know about those kind of dudes in the NBA. And maybe it shifts. And like, look, I know that it was a crowded backcourt, but like it didn't go well, and like Boogie Ellis all of a sudden can play with the ball in his hands a little bit more and goes from a guy who nobody talked about this year at all to a guy who like had a great G League elite camp, good combine, and all of a sudden he's back to people like, oh, who like can shoot a little bit and like can create his own shot? Like Boogie Ellis can do that. And I know it was a weird situation all around with that backcourt, but like one of my concerns is like because of that, and let's talk about it in the context of his shooting, just like he has to be he has to be your ball handler. You have to commit to him and give him the keys to make it work, I think. Like I think he would struggle to play like next to somebody else who needs the ball in their hands at all. Otherwise, I guess you need like a Malik Monk next to him. And who obviously like, he can create his own offense, but like a Bradley Beal, like you need one of those guys next to him in the backcourt. Because you need a shooter, you need space next to him, right? So like putting like a Jalen Suggs would not be good, like that kind of guy, right? Like, and Suggs he got better as a shooter this year, so shout out to Jalen Suggs.
Yes.
But just in the like, I just wonder like, all right, we got to watch him dribble, or come off a screen and get into the paint and get to the rim. I just don't know if stylistically, if that's what winning basketball teams do nowadays, especially like when you're not an outlier athlete, like Anthony Edwards, obviously like something he struggled with early a little bit, like trying to find, and Isaiah Collier is going to come into the NBA like a much, much better passer than like, or with more of a passing mindset than Anthony Edwards had. Anthony Edwards showed some pretty sick playmaking flashes at Georgia, like that, like 3/4 court, transition bounce pass. I think it was in the Maui Invitational was insane. So it was always there, whatever. But like finding that balance of like putting pressure on the rim, pulling up for jump shots, getting other guys involved, moving off the ball. These are all real questions that I have about Collier and his game. So like, while I do think he can get to the rim and put pressure on it, I just like, I don't know how valuable or how good your team's offense is going to be if he's specifically the one who is kickstarting it. And I kind of think that his style of play is that he needs to be the guy that's kickstarting it and has that high usage. I mean, what was his usage? Like 30% this year?
Double check.
Like I think it was like 30% this year. Like
his usage was 29.7. Yeah. Right there.
So right around 30%. And then like, I don't know, like, do you have a lot of confidence in him, like playing off the ball a lot? Like, I just don't think instinctively, like, all right, so as a shooter, do I think he could be like a 36% shooter, right around league average? Maybe a couple of years, right? Like, I don't know if it'll be consistent. Like the fact that he's not a good free throw shooter doesn't lend a ton of confidence to me. I think he's got the Draymond shooting package. He's got the backpack thing. Stiff kind of follow through, no real fluidity. Like it's like stiff a little bit. Sometimes like I think he's going to be a guy who makes shots because he's going to take shots. Like I think he's not going to lack confidence pulling up necessarily. He'll shoot if a guy goes under, I think. But like I don't know about the catch and shoot stuff. I think the shooting is a real issue for a guy who you might need to like kickstart your offense. And I just don't know if he's like Luka's never been a high percentage 3-point shooter, but like Luka can manipulate everything on the court, and he's hitting tough shots, and he's 6'7" or 6'8" or whatever the hell he is. So like, I don't know. I think it's like different than like the type of shooter that like Luka is, where he's the offense and he's the engine. And I don't know, maybe if Collier was 6'7" or 6'8", it'd be different. But like, I think they're different playmakers.
Corey, I think this is a good time for me to come in because the first thing, I think the last thing that you said about Luka, I think that applies to Trae Young, Devin Booker, both guys. I don't know if you knew this because I was shocked when I wrote about this in my piece coming up. Trae Young and Devin Booker have never shot over 40% in the season from three, which I didn't know. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
No, I actually would have guessed that.
Yeah, but exactly. But the thing is, high volume, right?
Mm-hmm.
They take a lot of them, which is good. And it's fine. And it's a big part of their games. And it's an important part of their games because it's something that, they've never shot it over 40%, but they take a ton of them and they make enough where it's a threat, right? Mm-hmm. Collier this season only took 3 and he shot 33.8%. For me, Collier, it's not even about the numbers. I've seen him shoot live. I've seen him in shoot around. I've seen him in a practice setting. I've seen him shoot in a game. I think his shot needs to be completely reconstructed from the ground floor is really how I view it, Corey. I've seen him miss so many jump shots in a row that I lost count. Was a real thing that happened. He was in the corner shooting with Bronny James and Isaiah Sellers, and they were hitting their shots, and he absolutely could not, to the point where he was like starting to lose confidence and he needed to walk away and drink some Gatorade and come back. Is the type of shooter that Isaiah Collier is right now. And that's a real first person thing that I witnessed on my own. And I've told you about it as well. I think his jumper needs a ton of work for him to even be at 33% is where I'm at, Corey, truly. And I think
quickly before you finish, I just want to say, because we talked about Bub and he actually shot better from 3 than Bub. Yeah. But the volume is the differentiator. It's the differentiator is the volume.
No, Collier took 3 per game, but also his totals, he only took 80 all season, right? He went 27 for 80 from outside. But trust me, like I've seen it, literally him standing right in front of me, and it looks really disconnected. As you mentioned, there is a Draymond aspect to his shot. His base comes and goes. Just overall, even also the way he finishes at the top, sometimes it's clean, sometimes it's not. Sometimes even in warm-ups, dude, I'm telling you, it would come and go. Sometimes he's doing the amen thing with his hand going the other way. There were a lot of things about his jumper where I watched him and I was like, you need to spend a lot of time on this jumper for it to even be respectable is kind of where I'm at, Corey. With that being said, I still think that there's a world where he can figure it out. And like you mentioned, be at like a 35% type of thing. And also even like from the mid range, there were times where I'd see him take some pull up jumpers and I was like, oh, that doesn't look terrible. Right. Mm-hmm. Is something that I did want to give him credit for. But overall, Corey, I think the most important thing that you said was that you were like, I'm not sure if NBA teams are looking for this prototype of guard. And I think you saying that is so important because my comp for him has not changed. I still see him as a less bouncy modern day Stephon Marbury. And I think it's important that we throw that in there because if Stephon Marbury was in this class with less bounce, where does he get taken? I think that's somewhere between 14 to 25 is my opinion, right? Obviously, I think with Collier and Marbury, give him credit. Like he was such a flashy playmaker, was so good getting downhill, a guy who was willing to take jumpers from outside, but he was never a good outside jump shooter, right?
Still, he was better.
Correct. He was better. And he had more confidence as well than Collier does right now, which is an important thing. I don't know if that's Brooklyn, if that's the Coney Island in him, but I just think that this prototype of player is hard to get around for me right now. And so the biggest thing for me, though, that I want to close with is that the shooting is far away. I saw him miss so many that I lost count. So I really do hope he spends this time in the pre-draft process really working on the jumper, both from, off the catch, off the dribble, because if he can get the shooting to a respectable level, Corey, I think it completely changes the discussion. And of course, we can say that for any prospect, like, oh yeah, if Khalil Ware shot it, 40% from outside, whatever, like, these things happen for all of them. But with Collier, especially, like, if he can get it to respectable, I think he's a really, really interesting prospect.
Yeah, he's still, I walked away thinking, all right, he's more interesting than like I was giving him credit for being.
Okay.
Because I do think the downhill stuff is impressive. I do like how he came back and he helped the team and they were better with him. I do think that like strength and being a strong, like I think there is like a good enough floor for him that he is an NBA player. Like I don't really see many scenarios where he isn't an NBA player, and I think that's valuable, especially because there are some players in the lottery where I'm like, yeah, I don't know, he might not be an NBA player, like that are projected to go there. I think Collier probably is an NBA player. It's just like, is he bouncing around and because he can't figure out a way to shoot and he's not like a good enough offensive engine that a team has given him the keys after his first team, and now all of a sudden like he's just trying to figure out how to fit into a new role. That's what I'm still kind of struggling with, because if he figures it out and he's just a league average shooter, and like I think that he's going to be the type of guard that can lead you to the playoffs, but because there's so much talent right now until there's like expansion, it's just like, is it the play-in game or is it the playoffs? And like the Kings didn't make the playoffs. De'Aaron Fox is like your top outcome for him. Like that's the kind of player is like your top. And having De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis doesn't guarantee you a playoff spot as building blocks. And those two dudes are fucking awesome.
Yep.
Right? Like, so there is a lot, and again, a lot of it comes down to I just don't know what he does off ball. Like he doesn't have like the instinctual stuff to where, let's say like I saw Kobe Johnson attack from the left side of the court, got baseline, and Isaiah Collier was on the right wing, and instead of like flattening out to the corner, he just stood at the wing. And now Kobe Johnson didn't have anybody to pass it to where it would have just been an open corner three if Collier just would have flattened out. Like there are things that are instinctually, like maybe that could be coached up, but like you don't know if it can. Yeah. And like some guys just have it. They have that feel. I don't like, it doesn't seem like Collier ultimately knows what to do when the ball isn't in his hands. And I think the way the game is played, like you want multiple ball handlers, you want multiple guys who can play with the ball in their hands. And if he doesn't have the ball in his hands, it takes away his effectiveness. So you have to make him the high usage guy. And maybe it works out, because I guess this is probably a good time to talk about, like, he's a good playmaker, right? Like, don't get me wrong, especially early in the year, he was making some choices.
Not in a good way, guys.
Not in a good way. But I really feel like at the end of the year, when he came back from his injury, he did a much better job of playing like a more nuanced game. Because he's very creative as a passer. He like throws bullets.
He does.
Like
Marbury-esque.
Like really can fire it in there. He can make, he can come off the screen. He can make the weak side hits. He can get baseline and all the creative, flashy stuff. He can hit the roller. He can make the pocket passes. He can do all. He's a great passer. His decision making, I'm willing to say, is less great, because he's not always making the right decision. Yes. But I think that he can get there, and I think it got better, and I think that it will, be an asset for him at the next level. But like, and I've used this analogy before. To me, like, it's almost like Collier's playmaking is almost like freestyle rapping.
Hmm.
He is a very reactive passer. So like he can ride a beat and like he'll give you bars and you'd be like, yo, that was a sick bar. Like that was tough. But like, can he make a hit song? Can he write a hook? Can he write a verse? Can he get the pre-chorus? Can he hit the bridge? Like, can he make a hit song and orchestrate an offense? Or is he just a dude who's going to make these super flashy plays because he can get in the paint and collapse the defense? Can he be Chris Paul? Can he just be like, I'm going to dribble slowly to the right elbow off this ball screen because the threat of my pull-up is going to pull over the defense and I'm going to be able to fire the ball to my weak side shooter? I don't know. Maybe he can. Maybe he can. I thought he got better towards the end of the year. And again, I think he has the skills as a passer and the vision to do it. It's just like, is he going to be able to achieve the nuance that it takes to master the point guard position? And that's what he needs to do in order to make use of his high usage role. He has to be able to master running the point.
Yeah. Corey, just want to go over a couple of things. Assist percentage 30.9.
Really strong. Really strong. Good.
Turnover percentage 18.7. However, as we mentioned, I thought he cleaned it up a lot towards the end of the season.
Yeah. Right? So not terrible.
Exactly. 29.7 usage rate, right? It is what it is. And I think high. But I think I'm right there with you, Corey. Your battle rap one is incredible. I'm just thinking, like, is he DNA? Is he Roan? Is he dumbfounded? Just trying to figure out which battle rapper.
I'll even throw it old school. Like, is he just on a DJ Clue mixtape?
Okay.
Like, is he a mixtape dude, or was he a dude who can, like, you can actually, was he like, you want to be Ja Rule in that era, but you might have to be, I don't know, stack bundles. I don't know.
But yeah, with Collier, like, obviously I 100% agree with everything that you said. Even seeing it in person, good passer, man. Like, he just is. Like, we don't have to get
straight up
crazy, just exactly straight up a good passer. The decision making can be wild, but look, also hey man, Collier also young. Like, obviously Bub is younger, but also Collier still, it's college
and also
kid.
Didn't play in like a great context with a great team with other great like
that
shooters and spacers.
Yeah, that team was rough. I'm still a Isaiah Sellers believer. I hope he figures it out in Stanford. I hope he gets a real chance there. He's transferred over there. Iwuchukwu was really hard to watch. Like, you look at that guy and he looks like a Greek god. Like, his physique is crazy and he's so tall and stuff, but it just wasn't working out.
He's gonna figure it out.
Maybe. And I know he had a heart thing.
Hope so. Yeah.
Freshman season. So I want to give him some credit. But anyway, just like with Kobe Johnson and Bronny and everything, it just wasn't pretty a lot of the times. And also, Corey, I forgot to mention what you said about Boogie Ellis is so spot on, because every time I watch him in person, I'm like, oh, he can go. Like, he can score, he can shoot, like, he's doing stuff on the floor. So shouts to Boogie. I think he played 6 years in college or something. So shouts to him. But with Collier, I think I'm right there with you. I think he's a flawed point guard combo prospect, a guy who has real strengths, though. Like, he's actually strong. He's actually fast. He can finish at the cup. He can really pass the ball. But there are, like, big warts, right? He's got, like, these big old corns on his feet that he's got to get rid of, like, for him to really be a high-end prospect. And I'm just afraid that if he doesn't get those figured out, he might be kind of an outdated type of prospect like we've talked about. So I'll end it there.
All right, let's get to his defense. Something that also got better at the end of the season, because he was, let's say, indifferent to defense at the beginning of the season. I think indifferent would be a generous way to put it.
Nice way to put it.
But I think he's got good tools. And I think he's another guy who moves his feet well. I think he, like, when he's engaged, he's using his length. So, like, all right, 6'5" wingspan. Not the longest in the world, but not stubs. So like he's wide, he's using it. He's strong enough to fight through screens. I thought his effort got better later in the season. Maybe somebody spoke to him and was like, "Hey, you need to like turn things around and be effort." Good in the passing lanes, but he is like very, very prone to ball watching. And that was obviously something that he struggled with early in the year. It's something that he struggled with later in the year. Like in the first like 10 minutes of the game, I lost count of how many times Arizona back cut him in one of his last games of the year. So he's just very focused on the ball. He needs to keep his head on a swivel. Again, maybe this is just a coaching up thing. Hopefully that's all that is. We didn't talk about the fact that he is an atrocious rebounder. I don't want to throw that word around because, like, all right, he's an iffy shooter, maybe not the best shooter. No, he's an atrocious rebounder. He's like, I think his defensive rebounding percentage was like 8.9 or something. Like, for a dude who is as strong as he is and like as athletic as he is, that dude should be rebounding the ball, man. Like, he should be rebounding the ball, grabbing and going, starting the break, and he just does not go after boards. And like, not good. That's not good. We talk about all the time, rebounding translates, right? He don't rebound.
Also, Corey, we didn't give Bub credit for his rebounding. His defensive rebounding percentage is double that, and he averaged like 5 a game. Yep.
And this is a dude who we think is like, all right, maybe he's a little slender and weak. No, like rebound, you got to want it, man.
Yes.
Like, dude, again, bringing back to Josh Hart. This dude was grabbing 18 rebounds a game just out of fucking trying hard.
I fucking love Josh Hart.
And I'm not asking anybody to go grab 18 rebounds a game, but like, dude, go get a couple more boards. Like, go get it. Go get the ball.
Corey,
go after it.
Everything that you're saying, though, for me, with watching Collier, and you're right, he did get better at the end of the season, but the overarching theme throughout the season was that he didn't want it. And I think it wasn't just the rebounding. I think defensively too, like something that I wrote in my notes here is that he's strong, but he didn't leverage his strength all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, I wish he was better about that. Like something that you talk about all the time, going back to a couple of years ago when we were talking about Davion Mitchell and the way that he used his strength to really mess with guys, getting his chest into people, getting them off their angles, getting them off their paths, right? Because he was so strong. And I look at Collier, I'm like, what are you lacking, bud? Like, you're strong. You're athletic. You can really mess with people with that, right? But he didn't, because I think it goes back to what you just said, Corey. He didn't want it. And it wasn't just the rebounding. And I think in a lot of ways he didn't want it. And I think, of course, once again, let's give him credit. He did get better over the course of the season, but we need to see more of that. With his physical gifting, right, as a lateral mover and with the strength that he has, he should be a much better defender. And if he had the type of defensive season that he potentially could have had with his baseline abilities, right, we might be talking about Collier way different right now, just even off the defensive stuff. And it's just, there was so much bad tape at the beginning of the season, and also just overall, just, as you mentioned, the off-ball stuff and getting lost and, getting caught watching the ball. It really, for me, was a desire thing. I think if he wants it, he can do it, because there's nothing that he lacks. Yeah, the wingspan isn't what it is, but there are a lot of good defenders out there that don't have the craziest wingspan. It's not like having a long wingspan is a requisite part of being a good defender. That's just not true, right? No. But with Collier, he can be a good defender even without the wingspan. It's just up to him wanting it.
Yeah, well, and we're going to find out how much do you want it, right? Like, because you're going to have to defend at the next level, because you don't defend, like, you're probably not going to be that top 3 prospect that's just going to be gifted minutes. Like, we see dudes taken in the first round. Taylor Hendricks was a lottery pick who spent time in the G League. Top 10 pick in the G League, right? Like, so you got to show this kind of effort. Like, the league is too talented now, man. Now, like, we talk about how, like, he's going to need this very specific, like, situation. What teams offer him that in your mind? Let's say, so his stock price is about 12, right? Like, that's what it was. He was like the 12th ranked prospect on the draft act. So by looking at the teams around there.
You said 12, right?
Yes, it was like 12 or 13. Here's what I see.
You gonna say Miami?
Well, Miami is on my list,
okay,
but because I think that if they took him, they'd be like, yeah, you are going to do this stuff or you won't play. We'll play some dude who we signed off the scrap heaps. He won, the fan gets to, he won a raffle and now he gets a jersey. Like, we'll play that dude over you if you don't.
Boogie Ellis.
Right.
Straight up.
But I think that kind of culture, if he could buy into it, would maximize his talent for sure. But like, if you're taking a chance on his talent, on his high school ranking, all of that, and you're like, he just needs the situation. Utah at 10 would be the team that I think would fit the best. A ton of spacing with their big shooters. I think Keontae. I had Keontae top 5 all of last year, and I think that Keontae is going to be a guy who swings on the ball and off the ball. And part of why I liked him so much is because I think he's so good off the ball. But playing with a bunch of guys who can space the floor, like if Taylor Hendricks is going to play more next year, he can space the floor. Like obviously Laurie is an incredible floor spacer. Bryce Sensabaugh, maybe he gets more minutes. He could space the floor. So like around a ton of floor spacing so he can use that rim pressure to kick out the shooters and take advantage of the gravity that they create. He's got a lob threat partner in a guy like Walker Kessler. There are pieces there that I could be like, all right, like if he's it might not be like the best pick for Utah. I'm not saying I would pick him if I was Utah, but if I was him, I'd be like, outside of the fact that it's Utah, I would be like, this is a good structure for me to head into. Because outside of that, it's like Washington.
I have a suggestion, Corey. The Sixers aren't really going to have a roster next season.
They've not.
They've got like 3 guys signed for next season.
That's right.
I like Nick Nurse as an offensive coach. I like the idea of, maybe you throw Collier in there as a backup point guard.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in backup minutes, he gets to play with Joel, and Joel obviously has shown he can shoot it from the outside. And who knows who else they have? We really don't know who else they're going to have on their roster, but we know Maxi's going to be there, and we know Maxi can swing on and off. I think it's like an interesting swing for them because we really don't know what that roster is going to look like.
Yeah.
The last one I would bring up was, I don't love this one just because RJ's there, but the Raptors. Just with that young roster and what they're going to do, it's just like I think oddly, like a lot of the things that he does on the court are very similar to what RJ Barrett's going to be asked to do and continue to be asked to do there.
Yeah, and then spacing issues like Scotty too. Like he'll have the ball in his hands. I thought about them for a second, and then I was like, they're not going to take the ball out of Scotty's hands for Isaiah Collier.
But maybe the Sixers, maybe.
Like Sixers, like you said, bench guard, change of pace. Maybe he does a little bit Tyrese Maxey impersonation without some of the shooting. But I think it's hard, like, to see him early in. Like, I don't know. Maybe if the Spurs really like the mid-8, I think it's tough early in the draft, like in the lotto. Like there aren't a lot of destinations that fit, and then as you get deeper, like he can't go to Orlando. I don't like him in New Orleans, Cleveland. Why would they do that? Phoenix, like, oh, they need a point guard. It's like, yeah, but like you're not giving him the ball when you have those dudes on the team. Like that, it's a different kind of guy. It's rough. He would never play for Tibbs.
Never.
Although Tibbs does do good with these kind of point guards. So, yeah, but he'd have to guard. He would have to guard. If he makes it to 24, like Tibbs isn't like, who I'm giving the keys to? And obviously, like Brunson, he's not going to overthrow Brunson on the throne in New York. So it's stylistically the way he plays. I think it's just going to be hard, and it might just be a team going, we don't care about fit. We're going to take the player that we think is the best player, the best talent, and we're just going to take him, and we'll figure it out. And if that works, awesome. Like you got a great player, right? Like he figures it out. If not, all right, maybe hopefully the next team figures him out. So
I will say though, Corey, The Knicks one, I'm reconsidering just because maybe they put him on the Deuce McBride plan where they're like, we'll grab you and we're going to give you 3 years to develop. And over the next 3 years, you got to learn how to play defense. You work on your outside jumper, and maybe you become, because the thing
Yeah, but Deuce was wired different. He wanted to defend.
Yeah. But my thing with Collier though is that like the Knicks don't really have a guard that can come in and run the offense because Deuce is so limited as a ball handler.
He's a catch and shoot dude.
Exactly.
With a little bit of like pick and roll stuff. Yeah.
Maybe Collier, but yeah.
Yeah. I would understand taking the swing. And obviously like Tibbs, Derrick Rose, like had a really great season under Tibbs. And even, Tibbs has always done well with guards. John Lucas,
we have Rokas coming.
Augustine.
Hopefully.
So yeah, but again, like that's 24, 25 in that range. If he lasted to the Knicks, which I don't think he's going to, but I also don't think he's like, I could see him falling to the 20s. I could see it. Not all of these guys can fall to the 20s, but like some of them can.
Yes.
Because I think that NBA teams are going to have way different boards than what the consensus internet rankings are. All right. So if you're buying stock in Isaiah Collier, who may you have bought stock in previously? I think we mentioned most of them. You mentioned Marbury. I still think that's the best one.
I want to give Dirty Dancer a shout out though, because Dirty Dancer was like Baron Davis when he lost his verticality. I was like,
pretty good.
Bad. Pretty good. Good
90s. 2000s. 2000s.
But I'm gonna stick with Marbury. Just I like the Marbury one. I'll just stay there.
Yeah, I guess like if you were like, oh, but look, Tyrese Maxey turned into a shooter in the NBA after only shooting 29% in college. Tyrese Maxey had good form and he was a good free throw shooter. Is a different thing. He just needed to make some tweaks. De'Aaron Fox, he's turned himself into a pretty good shooter, right? But I think De'Aaron Fox is a better athlete, even though Collier has a much better frame coming in. And then it's like Colin Sexton, Emmanuel Mudiay. Like there are ways that this doesn't go great. I think there are high end outcomes for Collier, but like there are ways that it doesn't go great too. So yeah, Naren Reed says consensus currently has Collier at 13, Carrington at 23. Like dude, if I can get Bob Carrington at 23, like dude, I'm doing that. He's the 20. Bub was 26 ranked on our draft rankings at No Ceilings, right? And Collier was 12. Yeah, so like I'm gonna take. I'd rather take Bub if they both were just in general. Like I said, I have Bub top 10, but I get it. I get it with Collier's talent. And with that said, Albert, I need you to sell me this pen on Isaiah Collier.
I had to compose myself first before I did this one. Okay, here we go. So when it comes to Isaiah Collier, it's pretty simple. If you need a guy who is a supreme lateral athlete, a guy who is really dynamic getting downhill, who could finish at the cup with strength and power and athleticism, then I think Isaiah Collier is a really interesting option for you. He's a really good passer, a guy who has his warts, a guy who really needs to work on his defense. He needs to work on his outside shooting. But if you're a team in the late lottery, teens, in the 20s, and you're looking for a developmental guard that has some really high-end abilities that you could see one day potentially becoming a lead guard, then you should take a shot on Isaiah Collier. It's just that he's going to have to work on the outside shooting, has to become a better defender. But if he can work on those things, the sky's the limit.